declared a state of emergency.
Do not leave your home.
The city's a mess.
Not be contained.
I've just been informed that we are going off the air and switching to the emergency broadcasting system.
Overdue for a new Facebook video. So I figured I'd do a quick one, maybe not so quick one, on what I've been reading lately, especially in the last month of August, especially, and a few books that I've recently picked up that I'm kind of excited about. We'll start with those first since that's kind of a shorter list, although this is not every book I've picked up recently. These are the ones that I'm particularly excited about. I'm not going to go through a synopsis, just going to show you what they are and then move on to the books I've read. For starters, finally picked up John Fowles' The Magus. This is considered a dazzling 20th century masterpiece. Been having my eye on this for a while, happened to see it used for $2. It fit in really good condition, so I picked it up at the bookstore. So I'm not exactly sure what this one is about, but I am excited to finally get to it. Hopefully this following month, September, but who knows. The next one I'm excited about that I finally picked up, this one I got new because I've been looking for this used and I finally gave in. This is Shantaram by Gregory David Roberts. This follows an ex-convict who does various things throughout, I believe, Australia and India. This is part memoir because the author, Gregory David Roberts, is an ex-convict, and there's a lot of drug use, violence, and stuff going on. Both of these books are masterpieces in their own right, and looking for both of them. So when I seen this one used in the store, I had to get this one, even though it wasn't used but brand new, because the plan is to read these two almost back to back. Which one I read first, I don't know, but I'll be getting to those soon. The other one I'm excited to pick up. Never read anything by this author before, but everyone seems to be talking about this particular one. I've seen it used and I grabbed it. It's the New York Trilogy by Paul Auster. I believe that's how you spell it. It's composed of 3 of his shorter works that kind of work together. One's called Locked Room, one's called Ghosts, and one's called City of Glass. Don't know much about this author. I was debating picking up more work by him because I had quite a bit used books by him at the store, but I just went with this. I figured I'd start with this, get my feet wet. If I enjoy him, I'd get more. If I don't, hey. But yeah, Bookstagram and BookTube are all over this current trilogy, so I had to grab it. It's only a few dollars. Hey. Another thing I recently picked up, I posted a photo of this. One of my favorite books is Balzac and the Little Chinese Seamstress by Dai CJ. I've had this for over a decade. This particular one is paperback. It's not too beaten up, but I've read it several times. So they had this hardback edition. It's actually quite smaller than the paperback. Don't normally see that, but it's really nice, almost new condition, first edition. So I grabbed that too because I enjoyed this novel a lot and I will be rereading it. And paperbacks over time do tend to fall apart, so I figured why not? Only a few dollars. Moving on to the books I read. We'll start with young adult. The first one is the first part in a trilogy. I guess we're gonna call it the Young World Trilogy by Chris Weitz. I'm not into young adult, but the reason this one intrigued me is, well, I'll read the back, and the synopsis very much mimics a TV show I used to love when I was a child.
look into the future, what do you see? I really need to know now, is there a place for me? If we're gonna survive, the dream must stay alive.
Authorities are appealing for calm throughout the evacuation process.
The Tribe, and I'll read the back, and like the synopsis is almost identical to the show I used to like. After a mysterious sickness wipes out the rest of the population, the young survivors assemble into tightly run tribes. Jefferson, the reluctant leader of the Washington Square tribe, and Donna, the girl he's secretly in love with, have carved out a precarious existence among the chaos. But when a fellow tribe member discovers a clue that may hold the cure for the sickness, 5 teens set out on a life-altering road trip, exchanging gunfire and enemy gangs, escaping cults and militias, and braving the wilds of the subway, all in order to save humankind. I want to read this trilogy because of how similar it is to the show I used to watch when I was a kid. The second book in it, called The New Order, is actually already out in hardback, but I'm going to wait till paperback comes out because, let's face it, this guy is not the greatest writer. You might be familiar with him because, let's see, we'll read about the author real quick. He's worked on, Chris Weitz is an Oscar-nominated writer and director. His films include The Twilight Saga, New Moon, A Better Life, About a Boy, The Golden Compass, and American Pie. The Young World is his first novel. So, yeah, the name is probably familiar to the people who enjoy those types of movies. So I decided to pick it up due to A, the synopsis, and B, he is working on movies that appeal to the same demographic his book is aimed at. There is nothing too appealing about this particular book, so I'm not even going to rate it. I wouldn't even suggest it. I'm reading out of curiosity mainly. So, but yeah, that's one book I read in this past September. The next one was sent this one for review. This one is horrible. It's called Diary of a Haunting. You might have seen me post pictures of it. It has this nice translucent dust jacket. I've noticed a trend with young adult books is the nicer the cover, the more work they put into making these books pretty, the less interesting it is between the covers. Like, this is just atrocious. This book is supposedly from the perspective of a girl named Paige who moves from LA, I believe, to a big mansion in Idaho. This Paige girl is clearly out of touch with everything. The author attempts to clarify why that is later in the book. I want to say that the author's name is M. Verano, but I doubt it. I'm pretty sure that's a pseudonym for a horrible young adult author. The reason is, spoiler alert, I mean, if you flip through the pages, who becomes a character in this book? None other than, I don't know if you can see that, the author. So, I don't know, I read this. I was both appalled for various reasons and irritated about this. It's supposed to be scary, it's not. It's supposed to have twists in it. They are pulled off horribly. It's supposed to be a diary. It's not written like one. It's written like your average young adult book, but even worse so. It has pictures in it, kind of like reminiscent of a new release that's going to be out soon called Illuminae, with clips from different articles and stuff thrown in. But I showed you that picture already. But it's just, I don't know, not even worth your time. But it deals with family moves into a mansion. There's some weird things going on there. They have it's the middle of winter and they have a fly and spider problem. That's where the weirdness begins. Throughout the story, our clever high school age writer here discovers that there's someone in the basement. The person living in the basement, his name is Raph, short for Raphael, I guess, is doing research on a cult that used to live in this house that they moved into. Some stupidity ensues, and we're supposed to be spooked out by it, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, there's that. I read this one not too recent, or just the past week. But yeah, there's that. My next book, I mean, I'm not doing this in the order I read them, but another book I read this past August is Zoo by James Patterson and Michael Ledwidge. I have some serious issues with this book. Okay, it's entertaining, but talk about plot gaps. And this one in particular has a great one, and it's only 5 years of missing story. And I'm not even exaggerating. Okay, this part of the book, there's a lot of stuff going on. It mainly takes place in Africa. A lot of animals. If you're familiar with the CBS series, you'll know that there's a lot of stuff going on. And while the main character is in Africa, he has a pet monkey who goes and does some naughty things, and so he gets back and discovers his pet monkey has done some naughty things. He gets arrested in the meantime there, and somehow, does this book tie any of that together? No. You turn the page, you're hoping that some of the stuff talked about in this section is wrapped up. Nope. Next page, first line. I don't know if you can read that. What is it? Yep. 5 years later. Yeah, there's a 5-year gap where the character in this section somehow transforms into a brand new character worth listening to. In the next chapter, I have so many issues with this book, it's not even funny, because in the second half, some of the things that go on are just ridiculous. And it's like, I don't know. This is one of those stories that could have been so much better, but it's like James Patterson really dropped the ball on this. Great concept, horribly executed. Probably would not suggest reading this unless you're really interested in the series. But there's that. Anyway, so I read that. Not too fond of it. I'm not really into giving books ratings, but if I were to give this one, it'd probably be a 2 out of 5 stars. But there's that. The next book I read, The Deep by Nick Cutter. This one is, okay, Nick Cutter is a pseudonym for an author who usually writes mystery novels. He's a Canadian. I can't think of his real name. So technically this is his second book, and then I believe second book under the name Nick Cutter, kind of in the horror genre. His first one being The Troop, which is phenomenal, probably one of the best horror books I've ever read. Highly recommend it. This was a 5 out of 5. Definitely a must-have reread if you're into horror. This will stay with you forever. His follow-up, however, this is horror, but it's in a whole new realm. This is more psychological horror. We're in a world where the human population's getting wiped out by a disease nicknamed the Gets, which is short for Gets, where people start forgetting stuff. They don't know how it's spread or anything, and it kind of works like a very, very advanced form of Alzheimer's, where first they forget little things, days of the week, stuff like this, take the pill in the morning, you know, little things, and then they forget the bigger things, you know, because whatever this disease is eating away at them. They forget, you know, how to breathe and how to do basic motor skills until they forget to live, pretty much. So, on a quest to find a cure for this, they come across a substance that seems as a likely promising source for a cure for this Gets, and it is way deep in the ocean, and it has some peculiar properties. So most of the story takes place, you're several miles, I think 7 miles below the surface of the ocean, and this is a much slower moving book than The Troop, and it's almost, if this is even a genre, I don't know, but poor meditation, because like the disease that's wiping everyone out is causing people to forget. The cure they're finding is it's helping people. I mean, it's bringing back memories, and some of the worst memories. And there's an interesting twist, and it's very slow moving. It's very thought-provoking, like, because in the back of your mind you keep, you know, remembering that the moment they start forgetting, they, you know, that's an indicator that they might have this disease. So they, you know, so the book keeps bringing up the fact that they're remembering all this stuff, but what they're remembering is terrible things. And our main character and his really strange brother are just going through some of the most heinous things you can remember. They have one of the worst mothers you could ever depict in a story like this. I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's still really good, not really at the caliber of The Troop. These two books should not be compared at all. They're, you know, this is like thriller type horror. You know, the pages keep turning. You're just running through this book, The Troop. Whereas this one's more like a meditation, and it's very thought-provoking, and it's a slower read. I don't think it's meant to be read fast, because you have things going on that the only way they could be going on is if you remember, if you, the reader, remember what's going on at the first part of the book and stuff like that. So, I don't know, it's pretty decent. I read it earlier this month. I probably give it 3 out of 5 stars. The Troop is definitely 5.5 out of 5 stars. So, yeah, there's those. The next book, holy crap, this book is getting a lot of attention. It's very, very popular. I've no idea why it's getting as much attention as it does. It is terrible. It is hefty. It comes in at almost 800 pages. It's the first book by Terry Hayes. It's supposed to be a thriller. It's called I Am Pilgrim. Only reason I read it is because this beast is everywhere, like in the media, and I'm not talking like on BookTube or Bookstagram. I'm talking like the legitimate media. So I'm like, what is making this chunky book so talked about? And I had to read it. It's so stupid. We're talking about a man who is in a position of government that is so secret. Basically, the only person who knows about it is the president, and he retires like from his top secret spy position in his late 30s. You know, so what does he do? And this is the most unplausible thing ever. He writes a book about what about what he did while in this position that is so secret that there's not even an official name given in the book about what this top secret organization is. Anyway, someone uses a book he wrote to plot out the perfect murder, and that's how the book begins. You running around the world. There's several storylines weaved together. It's a entertaining book if you're not gonna think about anything that's going on, how implausible it is. It kind of uses subtle racism as a plot point, because one of our quote-unquote bad guys practices Islam, watches his father get beheaded in Saudi Arabia, therefore becomes a fundamental extremist through a series of unfortunate events. Anyway, we have Mr. Pilgrim chasing I forget the name of that they give the bad guy. Anyway, trying to trace him down because the bad guy has devised a plot in which he's going to take down the U.S. and lo and behold, it is done by making smallpox and putting a form of smallpox that cannot be stopped even with a vaccine. That's another thing I want to talk about. The whole smallpox thing that it talks about in here. I mean, a good chunk, I'd say a good eighth of this book is just about that, and that part, it's like, when I was reading it, it was like, excuse me for one moment. It was like rereading Richard Preston's The Demon in the Freezer, which, if you don't know what this is about, it's a nonfiction about this smallpox and how scientists came together and developed a vaccine to get rid of this very deadly and horrible disease and virus. So it's like Terry Hayes took this book and just kind of shoved it into his storyline, and some parts I've read this a couple years ago, so I'm wondering, I'm curious how much he just kind of ripped from this verbatim. Anyway, Terry Hayes, of course, is a big Hollywood director. That might be why this book is getting so much attention. I don't know, it's just terrible. And I'm on the fence, but I would give it probably a 2 out of 5 stars, if anything. Yeah, it took me a while. I will admit that when I got to right around page 600, it finally gave me legitimate interest into what was going on in the story, and so I slugged through like 600 pages before I actually found a part that was gripping enough for me to want to continue. So, there's that. Next book I need to discuss, because, I Am Pilgrim is being touted as a spy novel of the highest caliber, apparently. So I want to read an actual spy novel. This is a thriller, but it's not one of those ones that you read fast. And this one I just finished. This one's just great. I need to get familiar with Ken Follett's writing, and I found this one used. It was on the half-off book rack at the used bookstore, and it was marked $4, so I got it for $2, and it has like a defect in it right there. I don't know if you can even see that, little dots on the pages, but nothing terrible. I mean, I've had books with worse defects in it that I bought new. At any rate, this takes place during World War II. This one is brilliant. Highly recommend it. It's a little over 400 pages, 450 pages around there. It is about a German spy who's in Britain, and he's there to see how Britain is planning an invasion of Germany and Germany's territories, I guess you should say, in World War II. His nickname is, the spy's nickname is Die Nadel. I'm not sure how you would say that in German. The Needle. He gets that because, well, it's kind of depicted on the cover. He has a stiletto knife that he uses to kill people. Any person that sees his face that could compromise his mission, he kills. This is a great book. This is probably one of the better books I read this past month. I was just blown away by it because, again, what I had to compare it to, because I'm not really into this genre at all, it's just I wanted to see how spy novels were done right, and the suggestion I got was, hey, read a Ken Follett novel, and I happened to come across this one for cheap and I grabbed it. Another guy I was suggested was John Le Carre. I have The Little Drummer Girl, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily a spy novel, but I don't have many of him. So, this chunky book took me a while to read, spy novel. It was just terrible, but this one was brilliant. I mean, and I didn't even want to read this one fast. There's a lot going on, and I'm not gonna give you too much of a synopsis that I've already gave, but let's just say that this author is brilliant. You are introduced at the beginning of this book to a couple characters, and they're a husband and wife. They're just newlyweds at the beginning, and you become familiar with them. And by the time the Needle runs into this characters, he presents those characters at the beginning of the book as if they were complete strangers, and because when you're reading about those characters that you were so familiar at the beginning of the book, you're reading from their perspective, but by the end you're reading it, those characters from the Needle's, the spy's perspective. So the spy, of course, they're strangers to our spy, so that's how they're presented, and he does it in such a brilliant way where when you encounter those characters you're supposed to be quite familiar with, they actually seem like strangers. Because you're like, those people, who are they? Then it clicks, like, oh, that's the wife and the husband's in the wheelchair, and I know who they are. It just didn't click because he presents them in a way, and from the perspective of a person who doesn't know who they are. And I thought that was genius. There's other parts similar to that I loved in this book. So yeah, I do suggest this one. I have The Needle, probably a 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5. And I would pass on Iron Pilgrim. It's just probably not worth anyone's time. if you're into the whole spy novel thing. But yeah, even I like the little blurb, and it's actually true. A spy novel of the highest order, Baltimore Sun calls it. Not sure when this actually came out. Ken Follett has written many books. This one, whoa, 1978. So it's been out for a while. But yeah, currently I am finally reading. I've tried reading this once before, and I set it down. We're going with Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. So, not even going to give a synopsis. This one's supposed to be real good, kind of set in the Great Lakes state region. So, we'll see how that goes. I may or may not do a review of this. But yes, till next time. Bye.